Retreat is not a monastery, and it's a path of diminishing returns. I've seen the path of people going on retreat again and again. It begins to do this. Whereas if you go to a monastery, it's the missing ingredient. It's the limiting element in the catalyst reaction.
In American culture in general, you think that the way to freedom is just less and less rules. Whereas what's fascinating about the Buddhist monastic Sangha, it's kind of proof of concept that discipline can actually lead to freedom. Physically attacked, thrown on the ground, put in a headlock, punched in the stomach. I feel Dhamma privilege that I can live in these communities, learn the Dhamma, felt like the true privilege in that moment. Even though I'm getting beat up, I'm privileged to have heard the Dhamma. Samsara, a good metaphor for that, is just infinite scroll. Samsara is infinite scroll. And what is the algorithm? Mara is the algorithm.
Mara gives you what you desire and what you fear. And Facebook gives you exactly those same things.
Wow.
The overlap between monk jokes and dad jokes is it's almost a perfect circle.
That's right. Ajahns, thank you so much for joining us. I know that both of you do a lot of interviews, but you seldom get interviewed by anybody. And now I'm interviewing you, so you're both mine. Welcome to our conversation with Ajahn Kovilo and Ajahn Nisabho. Why do Buddhist monks want to stay close to you? What monkey business do monks have? The Ajahns started the conversation by telling a joke.
One of our Thai monk friends, when he learned that we were living in Seattle, going for alms to Pike Place Market, world famous fish market, he says, he's very deadpan, very low voice. He says, "I am worried about you."
Okay.
And his English is his second language, and he's still kind of learning it. And of course, the jokes are really hard to tell. He says, "I'm worried about you. I'm afraid you won't get that much food at Pike Place Market because they sell fish." I was just amazed that he could try to make that joke. Yeah, so, yeah.
It's been impressive how unselfish they've been, even though,
Selfish.
but it's like, the first, for those who don't know our tradition, it's the Buddhist monastic code, 2,600 years old, and the Buddha set down these rules about us not touching money, not using money, and not being able to ask for anything. And you kind of think about how that would manifest in the world, and how impractical it would be on one level, but you really get to see the goodness of people and how they come forward. And, we started going to Pike Place and just standing outside of the first Starbucks, which was our kind of,
Wow. Of
landmark.
all places.
Exactly, a pilgrimage of sorts. And yeah, our first visit there, I think 7 people gave food within about a half an hour. And in 5 years, we haven't gone hungry once. So you really see the goodness of humanity every day.
Starting from day one.
Yeah, not hungry once.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's been really astounding. Just people can see so much darkness in the world, but we really get to see the good that's there. And it's an ancient form, but humanity's second oldest institution. The Jains beat us by a few years. And you wouldn't think it would be as relevant, but it really is. And people are, they're hungry for meaning and purpose these days. And Seattle's the most secular city in the US. And yet what we found is kind of moving into it with this aspiration to create a forest monastery near Seattle. There's been huge interest in a community formed in these last 4 or 5 years. We meet every Saturday at Pike Place, or at St. Mark's Cathedral. This Christian community opened up to us. We kind of this clear aspiration of Clear Mountain, which our hope was to create a monastery, a forest monastery, near enough to the city that people could go there on a daily basis and have it be a piece of their life. Because in some ways, this is the great missing puzzle piece in American Buddhism right now, I think, is a monastery people can touch into. And then just this year, we found land, and Ajahn Kovilo can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah. So looking for a piece of land which is far enough away, but not too far. And that's kind of almost that paradox of a monk's life. If one goes too far away from society, there's so many ways that a human heart can kind of go off. Yes. If there's too much seclusion, the Buddha has a great simile of it's like a cat who sees these great elephants playing in this deep pond, and he thinks, oh, I can just jump in the deep end and, wash my back with these lotuses, and then the cat jumps in, or the cat or rabbit jumps in, and it just drowns, or it gets either sinks or it gets, floats away. And it really does take training. One would think that it would be the easiest thing in the world to sit quietly in a forest alone, but it's actually not. It's not like you just go back to nature and everything is just natural. Especially certainly for myself, growing up in city and in Ohio, Cincinnati, to non-Buddhist parents, never having been to a monastery, had never heard of a monastery. It's difficult. We're raised on computers and, with phones and every kind of way to distract ourselves. And it's a training ground. So we're 40 minutes outside the city, but we've got community. Right now it's just Ajahn Nisabho and myself, but we've got a lot of great monk brothers. I ordained in the Ajahn Chah tradition at a monastery called Abhayagiri, which is about 2.5 hours north of the Bay Area.
Yes.
And it's a community of 15 to 20 monastics who are doing this together. And we serve as mirrors for each other. And so too, when lay people come to visit the monastery, which again, for them, lay people are so immersed in city mind, the complexity of connected mind. And then even just being able to come to a green place where everything is not angular. You come to the forest and there are no right angles. There are no right angles. And you don't realize actually how tight and how sharp the mind can be, overly sharp, until you come out into nature, and then everything's rounded, no right angles, no like monocolor. It's just everything's natural. Come out into the forest, and then you're there with other people who are trying to figure out how to be alone in nature by themselves, and a shared work together. So we're doing that as monastics, and then people can come to visit the monastery and get a flavor of that. And it's kind of amazing how quickly that can happen. So
there's an interesting thing called the region beta paradox, where if things are at a low grade sense of dysfunction, things won't change. You'll just sort of get by with things in kind of this vague state of dysregulation.
Yes.
And I think we're at a really interesting moment in society right now where things are really, shifting quite radically. I mean, AI is causing a huge amount of change, and I think there is a sense of spiritual search now. Like, people can look to the negative of that and think, there's so much entropy and upheaval happening. And I think what people can miss is, the amount of spiritual search and hunger we've seen now has been really heartening, and just in terms of coming into community with a group of people in person in the forest and grounding an actual shared communal experience like that is, it's more relevant than maybe it's ever been. So it's been interesting to step into this landscape, and monkey business or no, so good.
So I was aware that during the Buddha's time, he recommended that the monks stay close enough to the community so that they can go for Alms-round every day, but far enough so that they can be secluded. Right? And is that that happy middle that you're trying to achieve as well?
Yeah, as monks, we have so many rules. The monkey business, a big part of it is learning how to live with all of these strictures. We were raised, our parents, a lot of new Buddhists, our parents were hippies, not used to any rules. And so...
That's so funny, you're right.
Yeah.
That's the contrast.
Yeah, it's the contrast. And we were raised that in American culture in general. You think that the way to freedom is just less and less rules. Whereas what's fascinating about the Buddhist monastic sangha, bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, monks, nuns, is that it's kind of proof of concept that discipline can actually lead to freedom. Freedom can come from discipline. And so, we've got all of these rules, and some of them have multiple reasons why the Buddha established them. And we're keeping the same rules from the time of the Buddha. We don't use money. We go for alms. We can't grow food ourselves. And what that implies is that we have to, as you said, live close enough that we can actually go with our alms bowls into town. We can't cut ourselves off, as Ajahn Nisabho says, in a spiritual cocoon, which, is some religious traditions do that, or like cults and communes. It's like, oh, we're just gonna, escape from the world and put the walls up, whereas we can't do that. And the accountability goes both ways. You can see when somebody's going off, and that's not a very technical term, but if someone's compromised on their discipline, if someone's like being sketchy, you can see it in their face, and
Like,
like that Mr. Black? Is that his name?
Man in Black.
Man in Black, exactly. That's right. Sketchy dude. So if we have to come in for our food and the lay people get the impression that, okay, these monks, something feels off about them, then they can just not feed us. And, we have to go somewhere else. So it creates this mutual mirroring for each other.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very effective check and balance. Is just stopping giving us food. And in the past, when monastic communities have started to grow their own food, or they tend to retreat from society and gather in very large groups. And it's one of the reasons maybe the fall of Buddhism in India was because, it often gets laid at the feet of these invasions from the north, but a lot of it can be laid at the feet of the fact that the monastics had stopped being relevant for lay people, and they'd gathered in these huge communities like Nalanda. But with the Alms-round, it kind of is predicated on this model where you have smaller communities in daily relationship to lay people and relevant for them, as part of their daily life, where people are coming, at Pike Place, we'll talk to people about their lives and their struggles every day. And it's interesting to see that for the last few decades, Buddhism has made inroads into America and had, I think, kind of sort of rippled out under the surface. But there really seems to be kind of a liminal point now where there's room for these ancient roots to now manifest as well.
So, for example, we couldn't really have a forest monastery before. Is that what you're saying?
It'd be interesting. You might have been able to pull it off, but it was easier now, certainly.
Well, there was an attempt like this. Jack Kerouac, the beat writer and like hippie,
It's me.
he was very influenced by a book called The Buddhist Bible, which was written by a guy named Dwight Goddard, who was just this American Christian guy who went to, I believe, Japan, very inspired by Buddhist texts, somehow got a hold of, this is in the 1910s, 1920s, and did very early compilations of suttas from the Theravada. So his book's about this thick. 1/3 is Theravada, 1/3 is Mahayana, 1/3 is Vajrayana. And he tried to start a community in like New Hampshire or somewhere in the Northeast in the 1920s. He went to Japan for a little bit to get some training, but there just wasn't the context. Like people didn't know, what is this guy? What is the Dharma? And really like, we've had over 100 years of roots in different, multiple Buddhist lineages take root in America through great teachers. And in the Theravada tradition, on the lay front, Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, really laying these roots, who did themselves study with these masters in Asia, in Thailand, in India, and Burma, come here and set down these really beautiful lay structures. But it wasn't until the kind of mid-90s that Buddhist monastic orders, and maybe the 80s, started set with Western Western monastics taking root in America and in Europe. Amaravati, Abhayagiri, several others.
And I don't know how much of it was the context being ready versus the people that came into the context really holding the Buddha's form purely. When I went on, we do this thing called Tudong, which is like walking pilgrimage. It's actually where Ajahn Kovilo and I first grew close. We ended up camping in a grove of poison oak together on a walking pilgrimage, just bonding. But but my first Tudong, I was in Australia, and the monk who did it with me, he came to me that morning before we set off, and he said, I had this dream. And in the first set of the dream, he was jumping off the top of a building, and his parachute opened, and he landed softly. And then the next scene, he jumped off a floor right below and his parachute barely opened in time. And then the third, he jumps off and just hits and wakes up. And he said, sometimes taking the biggest jump is the safest, actually.
True.
And the sense of like, these other older lineages, often they didn't keep the stricture of not using money. Often they weren't keeping good vinaya. Like, I actually think that if, there's this conceit in the West, like, Buddhism will have to alter itself to mold itself to Western conceptions to fit in. And there's some truth. There's some things we've had to adjust slightly, but like Ajahn Kovilo makes this great point in this essay called Lineage of the Noble Ones, or Traditions of the Noble Ones, where he makes the point, like, if a really strong Sangha comes into any society, what it does is it changes the society around it. Right. And like, actually, I think if you'd taken a really good practicing monk 50, 60 years ago and put them into almost any context, I've seen a lot of the people who give us food had no idea about, maybe they'd heard about the Dalai Lama, but not a lot. So there's a real power to what the Buddha did, and there's something about that leap of faith as Buddhists everywhere, not just monastics, taking that into account. Like, I think the Dharma, and you probably encountered this, Meng, with, leaving Google and other things, where like the Dharma asks you to give up something, and it takes a leap of faith to do it, but if you're willing to, you find there's something to catch you, So.
Wow, I really like what you just said. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because it's so important. That I think what you just said is that to have a Sangha being bounded by a very strict vinaya changes the society around it. And the reason is because we don't do Buddhism light. We do Buddhism max.
Yes.
Max flavor.
Yeah.
And because it's max flavor, it's not light. You get authentic Dharma, people can see it, and it changes everybody around it. And I think we couldn't do it before, and Jack Confield tried. I mean, he came back to America as a Theravadan monk, and he went on Alms-round, and he got no food at all, right? Because the society back then wasn't ready for him. And I think you're exactly right, that society right now is ready for you, and you're doing it now. And I just have to say thanks to both of you for doing that.
What you say is very interesting, and the seeds weren't there, or they hadn't been watered when Jack was trying to do it in the mid-70s, whereas now seeds are just constantly being watered. I mean, even with the Peace Walk monks, with Venerable Paññākāra, as they were doing that, people, more and more people who weren't Buddhist, but who just saw his Instagram feed or something, sees him and is inspired and is like, wow, I don't even know why, not Christians or whatever it is, just this seems like a good thing to do. And especially it's like happening at the same time as kind of violent protests. It's like he's doing his version of nonviolent. It's hard to even call it protest, but it's profoundly protest, but it has none of the protestingness of things. And people are moved by that, like at a very deep level. And we saw the ripples of that. More people were coming up to ask us what we were, coming to offer alms, and profound effect. So it's still happening. It's in process, growth.
When your monastery is built, 45 minutes. I think 45 minutes drive, not walk from the city. How are you going for daily Alms-round?
We're 40 minutes from Seattle proper, so this large metropolitan area, but North Bend is a small community which we're near. So that'll be maybe a 10-minute walk or 5-minute bus, so pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So you fully expect to either walk or take a bus to town
pretty much.
And doing Alms-round every day.
Yeah. It's been heartening, and we've just felt very held and really grateful for the support and just the care, that we've received. Even you just inviting us to speak and how much interest there is, it's been very heartening. Ajahn?
There's this like a kind of mutual up-game feedback loop that happens, which I really do feel this on almost, if not a daily basis, certainly a weekly basis. Of this past weekend, we were meeting with the board and the new Sangha Council of Buddhist Global Relief, and really inspiring monastics, Bhikkhu Bodhi, Ayananda Bodhi, Venerables from Sravasti Abbey, and the board of Buddhist Global Relief, who are very extremely competent, successful, kind, well-adjusted lay Buddhists. And it's like, wow, and they're showing reverence to us. And it's like, in every traditional culture, has this value of respect for elders. And there's that feedback loop there. It's like if someone is, showing gestures of respect and reverence for someone else, if it's your elder, if it's your grandma, you're massaging their feet, or, in Thailand, actually bowing to your grandma and having days of the year where that's celebrated, but just in general, this whole movement of the heart towards humility and offering, then the elders want to reciprocate and be worthy of that. And so too for any monastic whose heart is just not totally hard, it softens the heart and it becomes this like, okay, I want to be worthy of these gestures.
Right.
I want to keep my rules very strictly. I want to meditate, keeping these, progressing in the threefold training of morality, of mind training, and training in wisdom. So, yeah.
So when you have a forest monastery, do you hope that lay people will come visit like every day? And how do you hope they will benefit from that?
Yeah, no, I think that kind of idea of a daily touchstone is really key. So having people be able to, because this is how it is. It's novel in North America. Most forest monasteries have been 2 hours outside of the city, which means people maybe come once a month or once a week. But if it's 40 minutes or 20 minutes from where you are, you can come in the morning and just give food and then share a meal with those around you. And pretty much every day having that ability, or if you have a day off, coming and spending it there. And the siloed existence, which is the great malady of America right now and Western society, the individualism, and that freedom has its benefits, but exacerbated by social media and AI and all these things. And meditation culture in, what's funny, humorously called the upper middle path,
That's right.
upper middle way.
Especially California.
Yeah, no, exactly. Cupertino.
That's right, yeah, we
But what people miss is that it's the Dharma has been framed by those same hidden. We really love our time alone but you either get the choice of the suffering of living alone or the suffering of living with others. And honestly, I think we've veered far too far in living alone. And Dharma circles, these kind of quiet, self-contained circles where people just get together and they meditate, but there's really not, even if there's some motion towards a communal tea time after. We actually just rode here with these two people, beginning, Caleb and Nina, beginning a community called Community Village. And their ethos is like, they focus on the non-meditation aspects, book groups, potlucks, no Zoom. And like, they're, it's in some ways it's extreme, but also they're hitting the missing piece that where sanctity comes out is in relationship. And the Sangha, like, people have this image of monks monking around alone. And the fact is, like, actually where we, the most successful monastic lineages have been, for moderns. The Ajahn Chah lineage was successful because it focuses on cenobic living, which means communities of monastics living with people. And that's where you really see change happen. And it's the great missing piece. So I think this, is the biggest takeaway for, modern Buddhist practitioners that I would leave it with, is like, focus on community, coming near monastics as well, visiting monasteries, but community. Like, if you need to just put aside one extra long meditation session a week and just invite some people over to feed them, that's a good trade. The Buddha said the sixth object of reverence is receiving guests, and like, that's what's missing. And yeah, I think it's the great missing puzzle piece. So that's what the monastery hopefully provides, is one measure of that. But if you're not near a monastery, just invite people over once a week, or start something where you're with other people like that and focus on that. So, did you add anything, Ajahn?
Just that we hope that our monastery, so we've got 90 acres, and 50 acres of those,
Yeah.
It's almost like a perfect yin-yang. So like half of it is kind of the public-facing spot, and that has a lot of wetlands and buffers, so we actually can't legally build there right now. And that will be where guests can come, where people can come and walk the trails. We'll have meditation platforms, Buddha statues, and where we'll have a lot of kind of on the other side will be the monastic wing. And the Buddha, the Theravada teachings are just so allowing and supporting and encouraging of seclusion, allowing, like it's not, okay, you need to be full service all the time. It's the Buddha saying, oh, actually, to be able to serve at all, you have to be able to have this heart of seclusion. So you're, rather than feeding on others, you can actually bless, you can bring blessings into the world rather than this codependence and this feeding relationship. So we'll want to protect monastics who come and stay there. And this side will be basically like a just monastic zone. And then we can come and meet in the place in between, meditate together, and just learn how to do both service and seclusion at the same time. And meditation in a group setting is fascinating because it's both of those. It's service and seclusion. When you're meditating with others, you're creating this environment of shared learning. So yeah, that's what we'll offer.
The one problem with the yin-yang image is that there's like a dot of the opposite, and so we're not going to put Ajahn Kovilo there in the wetlands, just little kuti. So.
Okay, so your property will have like the nirvana side and the samsara side.
We're not going to frame it that way.
With signs warning, you're entering the nirvana side. Okay.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah.
Ajahn, what's your opinion on city monasteries?
I think there's a lot of idealistic bias amongst young macho Americans who do encounter a very strict vision of what a monastic life is, or a very strict version of Buddhism. So in traditional Buddhist countries, you got this division between forest monasteries and city monasteries. And young idealistic Americans, often convert Buddhists, think that the forest monastery is the way to go. The city monasteries are corrupt and not practicing. They don't meditate. They don't keep the rules as well. Maybe they're using money. The forest style, that's the real hardcore practice. That's the original practice. That's what the Buddha was doing. Wander alone like a rhinoceros is one sutta. And a lot of that idealism is just, one, it's just unkind. And two, it's just uninformed. Like, it's a cartoon picture, this dichotomy, and oftentimes I've met so ordaining in America at Abhayagiri, my 3rd year as a monk, 5th year living at 6th year living at a monastery, go to live in Thailand, so good, because all of us convert American Buddhists have this fairy tale idea of what a monk should be, what a monastery should be, all these should, and oftentimes it's very stark, it's very austere, it's overly macho and unrealistic, and people come into a monastery and they're just fault-finding, like constantly, subconsciously, semi-consciously fault-finding. I'm the best monk ever, the most macho, the most hardcore, and then it's not sustainable.
And the most humble too.
And the most humble, yeah, exactly. Whereas I've met a lot of, going to Thailand, just really sweet monks who happen to live in cities, and that's where they ordained, where they lived, and their parents live around there. And you can serve a lot of people. If you're in the city, it's a different kind of service than you can do in a forest monastery. But I think it really is the individual's heart and their own inclinations and affinities. For both of us, the forest path does draw us. There's so much to learn in the forest. And we do come into the cities to teach at St. Mark's and Capitol Hill in Seattle. And there's so much to learn from that, learning about how to be with others from a place of balance, not getting pulled or pushing away. So, yeah.
Would you have liked to have founded a monastery in the city?
No.
Agreed.
There's a funny story. A former monk named Paul Brider, he disrobed, and Ajahn Chah was coming to the West and kind of giving him a hard time. He served as translator, and he was sort of poking fun at him the whole time for disrobing and leaving the forest monastery. And there's one talk where he turns to Paul and says, "Look, where did the Buddha become enlightened?" And Paul's very sharp, and he says, "In his heart." And Ajahn Chah says, "Yeah, but where was he sitting?" Under a tree.
Oh, okay, I was going to say on the butt, but
Actually,
It's true.
Ajahn Chah would have had a good time with you, I think. Meng.
Yeah.
So, no, we appreciate the forest, and people they miss that side. And community, if I had to emphasize one thing, it is, we'll have both sides. So near enough people can get there, but the forest is key.
So Ajahns, I really appreciate the idea of this forest monastery that's close to people. And I think of a lot of young people, they're suffering. I mean, we're all suffering, but young people today are suffering even more. There's so much uncertainty in the world. A lot of issues that we face, like climate change, are affecting them more than they're affecting us. Because probably by the time the ice caps all melt, I will be dead, but they will be alive, right? And then AIs are taking over their jobs, and so on. So given the difficult environment they are in, how would a forest monastery be helpful to people like them?
Yeah, one of the unique aspects of a modern life for anybody of any age is just digital distraction. And just how easy it is to just scroll, to just doom scroll for hours and hours. And the algorithm, we've got a great metaphor, and I think this is kind of profound, is that, samsara, a good metaphor for that, is just infinite scroll. Samsara is infinite scroll. And what is the algorithm? Mara is the algorithm. Right. Mara, this influence, basically the embodiment of external negative influence. You've got this algorithm which knows people better than we know ourselves, and can basically, it's not giving you what you need, it's just giving you...
I like that, because Mara gives you what you desire and what you fear. And Facebook gives you exactly those same things.
Wow, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so addictive, because even though parts of ourselves, the wiser parts of ourselves, just say, okay, actually it'd be better if I stepped back. Still, the pull is so much. And one of the beauties of a forest monastery, the forest monasteries I've stayed at, they're far enough away that they don't have Wi-Fi. You can't get cell service. So it's like
that sounds tough.
It does sound tough, but it's a forcing function. And because the environments are so beautiful, it's like there's nothing to scroll. There's just stroll. You can walk around the monastery and... Yeah, cheesy.
Stroll, not scroll.
You come to a monastery and you can see, certainly in the community, like oftentimes just being with nature, for some people, it's just not stimulating enough. But when you come to a monastery, a forest monastery, what we hope Clear Mountain will be, and already is in its current manifestation, you find that actually connecting with other humans who are interested in the same thing we are, it's more interesting. It's not as, like gratifying of a certain type of clinginess, but it is more deeply gratifying and satisfying and beautiful. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. I want more of this. And then seeing the beauty of just living out in nature, and it's just an alternative. And oftentimes the Buddha's teachings in the Theravada are framed, or in any type of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, which are framed around the causality of suffering, or unsatisfactoriness. So the causality of suffering is craving and attachment, and the causality of happiness. Happiness, the highest happiness being Nibbana, the third noble truth. Yes. But the causality of that is just wise living. And so showing that, but that's framed in terms of the negative, sort of dukkha, whereas the Buddha also talked about sukha. He says, you can conceive of all of the Buddhist teachings as just a training in getting better at sukha, getting better at happiness, getting better even at pleasure. Like the pleasure of samadhi, of meditation, is better, is more gratifying, is longer lasting, is clearer, is less sticky than scrolling, than attachment, all the types of things which we're addicted to, so many of us. So, and you can see that and take steps. It's like, okay, I can let go of that and then take this next rung on the ladder, and more cleaner and cleaner happinesses. So. And a monastery can kind of give a flavor of that. You come in and like, oh yeah, I like that taste.
In order for that to happen, do they have to visit often?
What do you think?
Like that scroll instead of scroll.
That's right. Yes.
That's quite good. I don't think so. I think Dostoevsky said, like, his great insight was the Enlightenment, the conceit of the Enlightenment era was like, you get rid of all this superstitious religious framing and people will become deeply rational right away. And Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, like, their great insight was actually take away the spiritual framing for people and they'll become so insane so quickly, it boggles the mind. And there's this thing where ideologies are crippled religions. They kind of limp along and provide a sense of cohesion and purpose. Isn't that great? And you really see this in the culture wars of today. And in the lost, like you said, with climate change, like each generation before this has had a pretty strong narrative. You know, the hippies, world peace and the flower children, and then the 90s, prosperity. And now we're in this strange moment where narratives are slipping through the youth's hands like sand. And on one level, that's alarming, and you could see the society beginning to thrash around for some new narrative to fill in the space, and it's the culture wars and all these things. And I think the great beauty of Buddhism is it's a palatable, sane, logical, spiritual framework that provides more of a container than the kind of, buffet of vaguely defined New Age spirituality, which, you take a little Rumi here and a little Mary Oliver there, and it's not enough.
Yes.
Because I think, honestly, if people have some measure of right view, like they don't have to come to a monastery every week, but 3 times a year if you can, or even just having that measure of a place to put suffering gives you purpose. And that's such an inoculation against the worst excesses of our culture. That guy's just going to keep following with chanting. There's some simile there. Okay. Hold him tight. Okay. There we go. And, if, like the Buddha did say this path was beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end, and Ajahn Kovilo pointed to joy as a key metric, it's true. But if that doesn't sustain you, the sense of purpose, that language will. Because life is tragic in a lot of ways, and there's some really frightening things happening. And if, thinking of your own happiness as the kind of goal isn't quite enough, think instead of like, what is a worthy purpose for life? And the Buddha gave us one, and that's the complete purification of heart. And I found that if people just have some touching into that narrative to step into, they can step away from all these other narratives so much more. And so I think if there's just monasteries around, if you get to see some of them, if you get to like touch into see a monk every now and again, it has a big difference. But then again, if you can move to Seattle and live near us, Meng, that's a big plus. Although I don't know how many stuffed animals we'll have, Meng. Yeah.
Thank you. I find a lot of inspiration just to be with the both of you. I mean, for a variety of reasons. I mean, first and foremost, because you two hold vinaya very strictly. That is extremely respectable. And so being with somebody respectable or by itself already is very powerful. And in addition to that, you are both very loving, very kind, and also you're very lighthearted, you have a sense of humor. I can make jokes with you about you, and you haven't killed me yet. So I'm very lucky. I'm access to you and people like you. For those people who don't have that fortune, who don't have access to both of you wonderful Ajahns, or who don't even live near a forest monastery, what can they do?
A lot of monasteries and meditation groups just do have a lot of online offerings for Clear Mountain. We've got many ways that people can tap in, and people do tap in, people we've never met before, but who join us online multiple times a week, from Europe or from Asia, and it's profound. We've got at least right now 2 hours a day of online Zoom meditation, which is kind of just a forcing function. You sit there and just be quiet. Some people have their camera on. That can kind of help with posture. Like if you know you're on camera, you are less likely to be, falling asleep. But if that feels weird, which it is kind of weird, I usually have my camera on just as some kind of support. But we've got 10, sometimes 20, 30 people joining these groups. And it's just, if you want to meditate more, here's this group online. Join them online. We've got sutta study on every Sunday evening. We go deep into the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses. We premiere a 10-minute summary of a Majjhima discourse of 152. We're on sutta like 100 now, or roughly 100. And then we go to Zoom afterwards. So for kind of framing it as like top-down, monks explaining something, but then it's more horizontal, of everybody can express their thoughts and insights about the sutta. And then we have these interviews. We'll be interviewing, watch out, interview with Chade Meng Tan, next interview on our channel. Yep, watch out. I don't know if we're going to have the monkey. We'll see. But those are fascinating. And they're like, it's not just Buddhists. It's certainly not just monks. We've got monks, we've got nuns, we've got Buddhists, we've got non-Buddhists, we've got lay people, we have monastics. And these are modern people. We've got great authors, interviewed Yuval Noah Harari, Sam Harris, but great teachers who we've respected and whose books have been on are probably on your bookshelves. Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, plus all these great monastics.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects, but also people who are fantastic, but most people haven't heard of because their books are not for sale. Like you can't find them in a Barnes & Noble. You only find them if you go to this monastery or happen upon their YouTube channel. So lots of ways on Zoom, on YouTube, or if people can just show up to our gatherings. Any other? We also have a Discord channel and WhatsApp group and what else? Instagram.
So much.
Do you speak to people on Discord?
No, we lurk. Honestly, it's a deep question because as monastics, we will get, you can catalyze. Our goal has been to catalyze community and not be entangled by community, but to facilitate connections between sincere practitioners is the key, and that's one thing we can serve because we want to be able to hide in the forest effectively, really.
I see that. Pay no attention to the guy behind the curtain.
That's exactly it.
Yes, we'll have curtains,
but
hopefully no razor wire, guard dogs.
Just a signs, you're entering the mana area, warning.
Exactly, and no, I think that's a key point. But if people can go visit, it's not that hard. The monasteries are free to visit. There's Abhayagiri north of the Bay Area. There's Wat Metta near LA. There's Empty Cloud in Newark, New Jersey. Temple Forest Monastery in the East Coast. There's Sarvasti Abbey, Birken. There are forest monasteries you can go to and stay at. And it's worth doing. If you're a practitioner, I found this so often is if people are ready for it, there's kind of a wellspring of old karma, good karma waiting for you if you step into those things. And even I've seen people go to those monasteries for 3 or 4 days and old, powerful merit comes forth in those situations. Mm-hmm. So Meng, Abhayagiri, 2 hours north. Oh no, you. So,
Man in Black?
It's worth doing. And people have a conceit of I go to retreat a lot. I've done a retreat every year. Retreat is not a monastery, and it's a path of diminishing returns. I've seen the effect of a pure retreat model.
That's very important. I'm going to repeat that. Retreat is not a monastery.
It's not a monastery, and it's a path of diminishing returns. I've seen the path of people going on retreat again and again, and you get it begins to do this. Whereas if you go to a monastery, it's the missing ingredient. It's the limiting element in the catalyst reaction.
What is missing? What's the missing element? Is it people like you who are practicing the vinaya?
It's part of that, and it's also just these ancient forms. It's like you've made yourself into molten gold, but you lack the correct mold to step into. And the monastery is that. There's ancient forms, a whole language of heart. People think that these rituals and robes and form some people dismiss them as superstition, but it's an ancient technology. There's a whole Jungian substrate to the psyche that speaks in the language of embodiment and story and ritual. And what I've seen is when people tap in on a purely intellectual level, it's almost like encountering a pond covered with thin ice, and there's kind of this roiling water below the surface that doesn't settle ever. So going to the monastery lets you settle those subterranean forces and crystallize them and really create a coherence of spirit. And if you've been practicing for a long time on this other level, everything's ready for that alignment. And it can happen in 3 or 4 days. You'll notice profound changes. But if you have not stepped into those environments, you need to. It's very important, and people don't know what they're missing. And it's interesting. Sometimes it's hard to get people to do that. Like there's a subtle conceit of like, I bow to no one.
Yeah.
You know, I won't go. I don't need that. And if you haven't tried it, I really would say try it. It's different.
Yeah.
Ajahn, what would you say? Yeah.
Just that it was certainly my experience going into these 10-day or 7-day meditation retreats, and it's like 10 days of peace and then 350 however many days of pieces peace and then pieces, and like, or just a life that isn't really supported. Like profound peace, it can be on these retreats at a retreat center, but then how do all the rest of the puzzle pieces of my life fit into this, you know, framework that the Buddha put out, or this, you know, really just any healthy life? You know, how do I learn how to speak? If it's a silent retreat, I'm not training or learning how to do right speech. You know, so training with Sangha, learning right speech, learning how to right livelihood, what that means. And yeah, it can just be such a siloed existence if you're just in a retreat model. Yeah,
Right.
can be.
As you said, a monastery is not a retreat. But what if I do a retreat in a monastery? Then do I get optimized?
It's very clever, Meng. Very Silicon Valley of you. And no.
No?
You actually, no. Okay, you could get some of it. But retreat is a problematic term. And actually, we just heard, we were just visiting our monastic brothers at Redwood Vihar nearby, and they use a different word, immersion, which is a good word. Because like the idea of like, what are you retreating from?
That's right.
And there's a sense of retreat is like, you know, the forces are making inroads and you're running away.
Yes.
It's not the case. Immersion is better. But for immersion to be kind of effective in these situations, like you have to align with the daily schedule a lot. The benefits I've seen chiefly from monastery are actually from the communal living element balanced holistically with the secluded element. And that's from the daily life living. And I'd say it wouldn't qualify as a retreat from how most people use that term. And that's a good thing. Yeah. Like it's much more immersion in that.
Community immersion. So that community immersion includes talking to people.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't talk to people, would it still work?
There are times, I mean, even at a monastery, times of noble silence.
Yes.
But for most of the year, just figuring out how to talk in a way which doesn't leave a remainder, doesn't leave like a stain on the heart. And learning how to be silent, learning how to talk and learning how to be silent. And one of the beautiful things about forest monasteries in the tradition that we're kind of grew up in is that you spend half of the day in community, deeply in community. And community, parts of that community aspect are sitting in silence, but it's also working together. And you'll be working doing chainsawing or, you know, wood cutting. And you have to be able to at least communicate on various different levels. You need to be subtle with it. And then the second half of the day is one of training in seclusion. And neither one of those are actually as easy as they might seem. And it does take a bit of time to figure out how to do each of those. Yeah.
We're giving a talk at IMC this evening, and we've decided to title the talk Relationship Advice from Two Celibate Monks. And honestly, the amount of learning from relationship, whether it be other monks or the Buddha actually prohibited, he admonished some monastics for keeping, they all were silent for a whole 3-month rains retreat, and he actually admonished them as it not being helpful. So too much.
It's actually one of our rules. We can't hold that strictly like that.
We cannot always regulate it.
No,
Wow.
so we have to be talking a little bit.
I had no idea.
Yeah, isn't that
fascinating?
It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah. Wow, it reminds me of this joke, right? There's this community of monks where they're all silent, and then one person gets to say one sentence a year. So at the end of first year, one brother says, "The soup is too hot." The next year, another brother stands up and says, "No, the soup is too cold." And it sits down. And third year, another brother stands up and says, "Too much argument, I'm out of here."
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
I really like that. Yeah. The overlap between monk jokes and dad jokes is it's almost a perfect circle.
That's right. So dad and mom, we are perfect together. When you go for alms, you have to take a boat, but you don't have money.
Yeah.
You can't even touch money. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so the Buddha, at the time of the Buddha, he did allow for monastics to have an attendant who would, if someone wants to offer, something for them, the attendant could accept. And the monasteries in our tradition have kind of taken that principle into the modern monasteries, where you've got two different 501c3s, at least in America, this is the model. One, which is the monastic sangha, which we don't have any money, and the other organization is the lay board, who hold all the liquid assets, and that was set up based on a Bayagiri and temple, and Ajahn Nisabho took those models and kind of created it in a Seattle setting. So if people want to donate, they can do that, and the board holds those funds. And if we have a need, like we would like to have a physical piece of land, which is 90 acres, and that's going to cost some money, the board, when those funds come in, can then buy the land. The monks will be the owners of it. They also can use those funds to buy an Orca card, which is, in Seattle, it's basically like a bus card, which works on any public transit.
Including the ferry.
Including the ferry, exactly. And then we go for alms, and just to acknowledge, something which does get asked from time to time is like, what is the privilege structure which we are benefiting from? Like, we are Caucasian.
Yes, right. You're white. You're
I'm
cis.
Caucasian. I'm cis.
You're clean.
We're male. We're clean.
Male, yes.
Right?
Male and pale.
Male and pale. Yeah.
Pretty clean.
Pretty clean. That's right. Yeah. It is interesting to look at this word privilege, and we are privileged in all of those ways. And so, just a year and a half ago, I was visiting my grandma, her 101st birthday. Came back to Seattle, was walking from public transportation, getting to the bus downtown, 7 p.m. on a Sunday, and was physically attacked, thrown on the ground, put in a headlock, punched in the stomach, and
as a monk.
Yeah, as a monk. So physically attacked, and the first thing that came up in my heart wasn't, I need to fight back at this guy. It was really just no reaction. It's like, and as soon as I could, wanted to get myself to a place of space, but it was one of, I do live in a privileged space of peace, and that was by far the most violence I've experienced in my whole life. Certainly as a monastic, there's nothing that's come anywhere close to that. So do have that privilege, but what I feel like was the real privilege there was that my next thoughts was that hatred is never assuaged. Hatred is never appeased through hatred. Only through non-hatred is hatred appeased. It's like Dhammapada, verse number 5. And that just very naturally, I had memorized the Dhammapada at one point, and then that was the first conscious thought that came up after I was getting beat up. And that was great. I feel like Dhamma privilege. I feel Dhamma privilege that I can live in these communities, learn the Dhamma, whether it's from Asian monastics, from men, from women, from cis people, from transgender people. If they're speaking the Dhamma, speaking of the noble truths, that privilege of having this right view, this helpful view of the universe, felt like the true privilege in that moment. Even though I'm getting beat up, I'm privileged to have heard the Dhamma. Yeah, we do have monastics who, don't have those various privileges, but do live on alms, like who certainly in Thailand, both male and female going for alms, less female just for historical reasons, but people do get fed, and we've got unclean monastic brothers who go for alms and they still get food.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think the structure that Americans conceive of dana are giving on is sort of, as someone with privilege and wealth, I'll give to you who lack it, and it's a gift for you. And it's very interesting because it becomes very relevant as a quite, coming from a background of a lot of privilege and wealth in the U.S. and going to Thailand, where you're walking for alms with rice farmers they're very poor. They're very poor, and initially there's that sense of shame of like, how dare I receive, and yet for them it's a moment where they get to be wealthy. Like, I have more than enough, so here's some rice, and I'm up subverting that whole paradigm of like, you're the privileged Westerner, and in that moment, like, there's something deep pride in those Thais knowing like, these people who came from a society that's so lauded in Thailand, like the West, with all this wealth, first world, whatever you want to call it, they gave that up because we have something in our culture that's so precious. It was worth all that. And that's beautiful, subverting all that. And yes, like I think if we were really dirty going into the city, like probably like I've been in moments where I've smelled differently and you know, the fact though, like the Buddha's parami is powerful. Bhante Paññākāra was not white, you know, and yet he received a great deal of support. And one of the beauties you see in societies with monastics going on Alms-round is the quality of generosity. Giver and recipient dissolve as metrics for above and below, better, worse than. I'm taking pity on you. In the moment of an act of giving, it's kind of hard to tell who, you know, neither one is parties above the other. And what you see in societies like that is like Thai mothers will have their children and like guide their hand to give little bits of food. And the ethos of generosity is just baked into the DNA of those cultures. And what you see is that branches out into them giving to the hungry. Like once the quality of generosity has been cultivated in a society, it ripples. So that's what I think we can bring. And acknowledging like looking past those structures of identity is problematic if you don't acknowledge them, and we benefit greatly. And there's a limit to how far that view can go, and there is a point where you step into a space beyond good and, you know, beyond those metrics and labels. And in Thailand, monastics are considered a third gender. It's kind of interesting.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for the person who asked that question.
Yeah. You know, what's the best thing about taking the ferry every day? You get to practice going to the other shore.
Meng. Oh, the good dad jokes, Meng. Keep them coming. I love them.
Last question for you, Ajahn. Is there one thing, maybe one sutra or one teaching that you would like our audience to learn or to remember?
Oh, you give that one to me first? Good try, Ajahn. All right. Maybe the one for today would be the 6 objects of reverence. The Buddha holds up Buddha, the Dhamma. These are the objects of respect. The Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, heedfulness, the training. And then those all can be very conducive to kind of one pulling in and focusing on one's own practice alone. They can really lead to the silent practice. And then the Buddha adds the 6th of receiving guests, the 6th object of reverence, hospitality. And I'd hold that up for people. Like, yes, focus on your practice, do your meditation, but what we're lacking, I think, is that opening to a communal aspect and the sanctity that comes from that. And that's what I'd leave people with, is like, don't forget that. Come into community, find your way to monasteries, and invite people over to feed them. Practice dana, giving. It's one of the prime qualities from beginning to end.
For myself, in monasteries, we do lots of chanting. There are so many things we can't do, but we can chant all day long. That's our fun. It's like playground. But one of the chants we do every day is what's called the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. I'm of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I'm of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I'm of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that's mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And the 5th one is very powerful as well. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions. Whatever I do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. And that really is like that radical accountability. Although there's no atman, there's no self in Buddhism, there is this radical accountability. And you can't really prove that until you attain enlightenment, but it is an amazing and useful working hypothesis that I'm the owner of my actions. I'm not a victim of a god or of society. It's like, I'm the owner of my actions. Whatever I do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. I can't know it's true. The world could be just chance, or the world could be random, or there could be no, rhyme and reason to how I suffer. But just reflecting, okay, the Buddha taught this. I'm the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, and just literally, saying it out loud. And it is a working hypothesis. I can't prove that. Maybe it's not true, but it does allow for good habit creation really like, if you're going to take on any skill, any talent, you're going to have to take that personal accountability. If I want to become a great pianist, if I want to become a great foosball player, I'm the owner of my actions.
Let's
my actions.
not do that.
God's not going to give it to me.
Please,
No,
you got
not me. But yeah, I think it's a really useful reflection of Buddhist right view. And you can believe it or not, but it's a beautiful, and I've seen the effect of others who've taken that on, our teachers who've been chanting that every single day for 50 years. And they're not, they're beautiful people. They're beautiful humans. Yeah. Yeah.
Just like monkey, very beautiful.
More beautiful man.
With that monkey, and I want to say thank you to both Ajahns.
Oh.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Meng.
And monkey.
Thank you, monkey.
I guess.
And do you think the man in black, might he want to say anything?
What do I say?
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about monkey business. This is going to be in the Outtakes.
Yeah, his posture just...
And I was laughing.